Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. In this video, I'm going to cover how to create jet engines in PlaneMaker and how to modify piston engines in PlaneMaker. So creating jet engines will be useful for those of you who are making fighters, and then you will probably need to know at some point how to modify a piston engine if you're working on the Ranger R7. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my aircraft that I want to create engines for. In this case, this is the one I've been using as an example for the past videos. And so when we left off, we had given this aircraft flying surfaces, controls, landing gear, proper weight and balance. And so at this point, this is something that we could drop from the B-52 in the special starts menu and safely glide down to a controlled landing. Although most of you don't want to make gliders, so you're going to want to make some engines at some point. Engines and all of their properties are in the menu item called Engine Specs. Again, big surprise there. Now the first thing you'll want to do, so there's a lot of information in here, and we're going to go through what all of these things mean in a bit. But the very first thing you need to do when you are making engines is actually make sure they exist. So to set the location and number of engines you have, you go to the Location tab. And this value here adjusts how many engines you have. So you can have up to 8 by default. There are, I think, some hacky workarounds you can do to get more, but I'm not going to go into those. I'm just going to start with 1 for now, just to show you how to make it. And then this value here is the number of propellers you have. This is going to be a jet-powered fighter, so I don't really want a propeller. I'm going to make that... so you can't actually make this 0. You have to leave it where it is, but you just wouldn't give it a size at all. So your engines by default start out at the origin point of your aircraft. In this case it's right here. And the way to position them is exactly the same as it is for most other things. So you can see that black dot there is moving along the longitudinal axis. I'm just going to put this engine at the very rear of the fuselage just to demonstrate what a pretty normal configuration would look like. And that's all you need to do to create your engine. So, oh, sorry, no, one more thing. Right. So you have to set the type of engine you have. If you have a carbureted reciprocating engine or an injected or a turboprop, you will have a propeller. We want jets, so no propellers here. I'm going to make this be a low bypass jet, so that would be a turbojet engine. And right now that engine is at the very back of my aircraft, and yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. Now the vertical cant and side cant aren't really values you need all that much, unless you're trying to model a Russian fighter, in which case their engines might be slightly angled up or sideways. I think the Su-27 and I think the MiG-29 also have this. If you're making a VTOL aircraft, which I might cover later in another video, you would check this box right here. Alright, so now that we have created an engine and moved it to where we want it to be, we need to give it properties. So that's in the description. Now, I'm going to open up the Ranger in a bit once I'm done making this engine and talk about what all these things mean. For now, I'm just going to go over some of these, but most importantly, these values here. So for your jet engine, you have the four main things you want to worry about are the maximum allowable thrust, and if you want maybe afterburner thrust, the maximum efficient inlet Mach, the compressor area, and the fan RPM. So the power of your engine the power or fuel consumption of your engine are something that is completely controllable by the user. X-Plane doesn't interpolate really on any of those calculations. So this allows you to pretty accurately model real-world engines, which some of you may be doing later if you're designing fighters. So what we are going to do here is I'm just going to look at the weight of my aircraft, and fully loaded it'll weigh just over 30,000 pounds. And because this is a fighter, I want my thrust to weight ratio to be close to, if not more than, 1, so I can have decent maneuverability. So I'm going to make my engine put out, let's say, about 17,000 pounds of thrust dry, so that's no afterburner. And then when I punch in the afterburners, that'll add another 10,000 pounds of thrust. So if you're making just a non-afterburning engine, don't put anything in here, obviously. But for fighters, you're probably going to want afterburners, so be aware of that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a compressor area. So this value here will determine how much drag the engine as a whole will create. So I'm going to say 2 feet, just because this is a pretty small engine in terms of size. This would be a turbojet, so not very wide. So it would have a pretty low frontal area. Now fan RPM, this isn't incredibly important in X-Plane's flight model, but I'm just going to give this fictional engine an RPM of 7,100 at full power. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is set your maximum efficient inlet Mach. This is somewhat important in determining how fast your aircraft will go. If you believe your aircraft is capable of going past the speed of sound, if you leave this at 0.8 Mach, your engine will become hugely inefficient past that speed, and you'll have a really tricky time getting past Mach 1. So for me, I'm going to say Mach 1.1 just because right now this probably isn't going to be a supersonic fighter just based on plan form. But if I modify it later, then it'll be able to at least get there, and then I can tweak that however much I want. So these values you don't really need to worry about all that much. Now, if you're making a jet engine, I would not change any of these values except for this one, so the turbine spool up time. This will determine how quickly your engine ramps up from any given value to full power. So I think this is from idle to full power, so 10 seconds is really long. For a fighter, I'll say 4 seconds is reasonable just based on other simulations I've flown around. And then don't need to change these values unless you have like 4 engines. Don't mess with this at all because it'll really screw up X-Plane's calculations. And that's all you need to do to create a basic jet engine. If you want to model it a bit more realistically, you'd want to set a specific fuel consumption. For those of you modeling a fighter, and you might have, if you have a set number of engine options, we will give you the specific fuel consumption for those specific engines, and you will input them here, and you will not change them from what those are, because you can make this be a very, very small number and get unrealistically good efficiency, and we want to keep things realistic around here, so don't do that. If you're just making an aircraft for your own personal use, you can do whatever you want with this. I just prefer to keep these at X-Plane's defaults just for realism's sake, because that's what I like to do. Now, the rest of this you don't need to change at all. Propeller, okay, yeah, so that is what you do to create a basic jet engine. So this is now a partially complete, definitely flyable aircraft. I would be able to take off, I'd be able to fly around, I'd be able to control this aircraft. Right, so now that we've created a basic jet engine, I hope that makes sense. It's pretty simple. You just have to know what the specs are and what they do, kind of. If you need any help creating jet engines of your own, please come over to office hours on Fridays and I'll be happy to help you out. Next thing we're going to go over is how to modify piston engines. I'm not going to cover creating piston engines just because it's a bit more complicated, and I don't think any of you will have to do that. So just as an example, I'm going to modify the Ranger R7, which some of you may be working with. So I'm just going to open that up. Right, so this is the copy of the Ranger R7 I'm working on. It's got a 3D model overlaid on it, so just ignore that for now. But let's talk about piston engine specs for a moment. So there are a lot more values in here that actually affect things in X-Plane, so I'm going to try to do my best to tell you what each of these does. So the maximum allowable power is the horsepower that your engine will put out at its red line. The red line is the maximum RPM that you will be able to attain with this engine, and the idle is obviously what you'll get at idle. The top and bottom of the green arc, these RPMs define what will be shown on your airspeed indicator as safe operating regions, and then the minimum prop governor RPM is only for if you have a variable pitch propeller, which I don't think many of you will. And then the boost amount allows you to introduce some sort of boosting agent into your fuel mixture. I don't think any of you will need to do this, but if you want to look into it some more, it's here. And then engine start fuel intro time will be how long it takes from when you start the engine to when fuel is actually going through it, and then throttle advance time. This is pretty obvious. The two main things you're going to want to possibly be adjusting more frequently is your maximum power and your red line, probably. So if I wanted to make this aircraft be 50% more powerful, I would make my engine output 150 horsepower in this box here. Just to be realistic, I'm going to increase my red line a bit, just to make that seem, just so that actually seems realistic. But when you are increasing the power of your propeller engine, you will also want to, your propeller, you also want to change some of the properties of your propeller. So if you increase the RPM that your engine spins at any given power, you need to change the design RPM of your propeller, otherwise your propeller will not function properly at the RPM that it'll run at full power. So I said 3250 here, so I'm going to set my design RPM to that value. Now this speed right here will determine how efficient your propeller is at a certain airspeed. So this propeller is most efficient at around the cruise speed of the Ranger. So if you, I personally wouldn't adjust this if you're wanting to see what effects increasing engine power has. So that's all you really need to know about that. If you have more questions about what you need to do to these engines if you're trying to create them, come over to office hours. I'll try to do my best to explain, but let me just tell you that creating a propeller engine isn't very fun because you have to also model a propeller that'll perform realistically with that engine, and that took quite a bit of trial and error when we made this Ranger for you guys. So if you really want to know how to do it, I'll try my best to explain it, but I think that'll be all for this video. So, I hope you found this helpful, and if you did not, as always, please come to office hours. We'll try to clear things up. So yeah, good luck with your aircraft, and I will see you in the next video.